Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of To The Point podcast. I'm Rachel Lyon, here with my co-host, John Neffer. John, what's going
Hi,
on this
Rachel.
fabulous Thursday? Yes, hi.
It's a great, fabulous Thursday. Yeah, happy to be on with you, and yeah.
I think there
So
was a little article, right? There's some news popping up that I think we wanted to talk a little bit about here at the top.
yeah, there's a lot of news happening here with this whole 23andMe thing.
Mhm.
It's kind of interesting to me that they got the okay and the go ahead to basically offer to sell all the genetic data of their customers in order to satisfy creditor requests. And to me, that's something that I personally feels quite alarming.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So
So
I think the impetus is on folks that have an account go and try to delete all of your information as possible, or is that ship already
it,
sailed, John?
I think that ship is still available for another couple of days, right? Until that
Hmm.
happens. You can download all your data too, so you don't necessarily have to lose your data. Download it out, and then if you don't want your data sold, yeah, go ahead and delete it.
I don't know, does anyone ever raise their hand? Please sell my data. Has anyone
I,
ever said yes to that? Yes, please.
I, yeah,
If I could get
I
a
would
cut of
hope
it,
not.
yeah,
Yeah, well, the customers aren't the
awesome.
ones getting the cut. It'll be the creditors. So
I know, right? Exactly. Okay, so um, really excited for today's guest. We've got Ricoh Danielson. He is a national security expert, a digital forensics expert, and a U.S. Army combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Welcome,
Thank
Rico.
you so much. Really appreciate being here. And yeah, if 23andMe, if you're selling your data, I think you should get a cut of that. You know what I'm saying? That's just
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever that might be, 23 cents, or, I don't know how much they sell it for, but, just a little slice of the pie.
just a little
But,
slice, not a lot.
yeah. John, do you want to kick us off today?
yeah, yeah. So you know, uh, looking at your background here and your exposure to cybersecurity in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's quite interesting. I was hoping maybe you could share with us how those experiences have shaped your understanding of cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things I did was when I was a young PFC, private first class, we're doing raids in Ramadi, Iraq, and also the Suna Triangle of Death. And after a while, it wasn't just hit and grabs. It was like, hey, hit, grab, and get all the intel you can. And we're like, all right, cool. And that was the first time I ever saw digital forensics actually being kicked off. And my digital forensics then was a very long process. You go in there, snatch and grab the hard drive, and you pop it into the reader. And then at that point, you dump the data, and then the analyst person will start doing their data. And it was usually like an Air Force tech sergeant or something like that. And then I was like, hey, that's very interesting. I think this is going to be something bigger for the consumer market. I think I was kind of ahead of my time, and we would continue to do these raids, grabbing cell phones. Fast forward, I get out of the military after doing X amount of tours overseas, and I was like, you know what? Let me revisit that idea. And digital forensics was there, but it wasn't what it is now.
Right.
And when I was going to middle law school, I had this brilliant idea to start up my own digital forensics firm. And because I met two Secret Service people and an FBI person, they're like, if you want to be in the game, do this. And I started doing it, and then I landed like a huge death penalty case, a huge murder case in Phoenix, Arizona. Never forget it. Joey Matthews versus State. Wound up getting that guy life sentence versus the death penalty, and because of the digital evidence. And then at that point, it was Jodi Arias trial. It was all these other wild, huge trials. And then we started pivoting into like more corporate security, more like a corporate espionage, insider threat, incident
Mm-hmm.
response, and it just propagated from there. And now kind of being getting into the space of been in the space of ransomware negotiation, ransom negotiation itself with threat actors, understanding what they need, who they popped, what's the ransom demand, and how we're going to negotiate it, and then help facilitate the payment of the ransom sometimes for different clients. So it's pretty awesome to be in the space, I think.
Agreed. I just can only imagine all of the information you uncover. You know, in cyber, there's so many things that maybe you don't want to know that you know, and you have to kind of compartmentalize. But it is kind of amazing what you could find through digital forensics.
There's a lot of things I did not want to see, but I was like, hey, you know, you got to see everything, right? You are the unbiased, unwavering truth in between, and you're the representation of the digital evidence itself. And it's pretty fascinating. It's pretty wild,
right? It's and I think about it in the context of, you know, kind of combat, conflict, being in theater. You know, there's like these cyber armies getting stood up, right? I mean, you got to fight cyber with cyber in addition to, you know, the on the ground tactics. You know, how did the digital forensics that you were pulling on the ground inform, you know, tactical execution, and did it inform a lot of strategy, you know, and help you guys pivot or whatever you needed to do for the mission?
Yeah, much like what we do now is we gather the evidence and we're like, okay, these threat actor nation states, right? If you look at it and just remove the threat actor nation states to a terrorist organization or an HVT, a high value target, you'll say, hey, we're going to go get Hassan, whomever, or Ali, whomever, right? Chemical Ali was one of the biggest targets. We got cell phone. We're like, okay, we start doing the data mapping. We're like, all right, this is our next target. Let's go forth, get the boys, get the raid, get queued up, get the con op going, and let's go execute. Then that one led to a next one. So the spanning tree of this digital evidence actually, you know, was very, very fascinating. You do that on top of different type of technology that can intercept text messages, cell phone conversations, and whatnot. And it becomes very, very wild. And you can make a split decision and also a command decision that'll either save people's lives or get you a huge victory in the battlefield.
Nice.
Yeah. And there's the same premise applied. If you look at, you know, if you look at the state of Israel, right? When Hamas and those organizations, what they were doing is they were doing their cyber attacks, trying to infiltrate and whatnot. And the Israeli government, Unit 8200, I spent some time with them, spent a lot of time overseas working with them. They were actually to narrow down the building, the floor, and the room. And then they would actually carry out their, you know, their response, whether it's lethal or non-lethal or a raid or a DDoS attack or something of that matter. But the Israeli got it down pretty good, and we actually learned quite a bit of lessons from them.
Yeah, I think they've been amazing on a lot of their other operations as well that we've heard about too over the years. So that's they've been quite impressive in my opinion. But thinking about that, what kind of parallels from you know these types of like actual, you know, warfare and cyber warfare do you see in terms of strategy and risk and so on, especially comparing it to the rest of the business you're doing now?
Yeah, so there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of methodologies that are pretty much the same. If you can dominate 3 areas: sea, air, and land, right? Network, hardware, and also the radio internet waves, you can pretty much dominate any type of battlefield, whether it's digitally or physically, right? When I went to Ukraine, I actually saw this firsthand because the Ukrainians actually took a play out of our own book, and they're like, hey, we're going to go ahead and dominate the air, which is all the drones and whatnot. They're using various technologies. The one thing they don't tell you is that they're using different drones actually to cause jam interception, right? They're causing radio frequency interception, and they're doing it that way. So as much as you'll see these warfare tactics on the physical part being played out, much more on the tactical as well from the technology perspective.
So I could talk about this all day. You know, so coming back to this notion of, you know, cyber warfare, right? And you look at like, you know, Ukraine is a big example with the volunteer cyber armies, you know, what's going on in, you know, the South China Sea, and the landscape is just really changing, you know. And so how do you see this global cyber threat landscape moving forward? It seems very complex and also very scary if you've got, you know, volunteer cyber armies on both sides, you know, not really being managed. And, you know, how can that impact these conflicts ahead?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at it from a special operations perspective, right? And you have to do force multiplication. You have to give people the purpose. You have to give them the pride and also bread, beans, and bullets, right? And also the ideology of what we're fighting for. One thing we did very well in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's maybe 4 to 6 of us on the team. we would go to a remote village and be like, we want to train you, and we want you to go fight that guy. And then it's like, cool, no problem. So it's called force multiplication. This is the same methodology and premise applies. I have a really weird theory that I think that we're fighting ourselves, if you will. I think there's a lot of counter corporate espionage, and we're just going back and forth. But that's a theory, right?
Yeah.
But how do you manage these unregulated, unloyal cyber armies, right? And it has to go do with ideology. What are we fighting for? Are we fighting for America, or are we fighting for freedom? Or are we fighting for both, right? So it really depends. Or are we fighting for a sovereignty and nation, or are we fighting for an ideology? It really depends on what is needed. Now, the way you kind of control and attribute that is give the people what they want. And what that is anywhere from money, greed, or attention, right? And once you can narrow those down, I think you have them sold and you can control any army. What I do see happening is the days of a grunt, right? Myself, a knuckle dragger on the battlefield, running, with a machine gun on the field, is not over. It's going to be very specific in time. But I think the more these complexities show up in cyber warfare, the more it's going to require a new era of soldier, which is we see with drones, and now we're going to see with the analysts, cyber warfare analysts and whatnot.
And are you seeing as well, like these nation states being involved in kind of expanding this into other areas like ransomware and cyber espionage and other things on the, bleeding into the commercial side as well?
Yeah. So let's just, take the big juggernaut in the conversation, right? China. China is really, really good at figuring you out, figuring out where your pain points are. I've been solicited myself. They came to me, they're like, we'll pay for these things, we'll pay for this. And I'm like, how do you guys even know that? And they already know you, right? So the three things they want to operate on is pain, fear, and pleasure, right? They're going to inflict enough pain, enough fear to give you enough pleasure, right? And then when you look at it from a global perspective, let's just take Africa, right? Africa right down the middle is being divided between the United States on the left and China on the right. And you'll have these sub factions of combat. And China is really good at what they do. They set up a warfare tactical communication center, and they have all these small little branches where you can come up and carry out your attack and do what you got to do, right? Same thing on the physical battlefield. Like if you take South Sudan, for example, I have a lot of friends over there that are fighting the good fight, and they're going back and forth over territory against the Russians or Russian private military contractors. So it really depends where our area of focus is at, which will lead us to our next, battlefield.
So coming back a little more domestically, so much of this seems to be happening really far away from us. Yeah, exactly. And I'd be curious in your opinion here. How prepared are Western nations? That are a little bit, we're stable for the most part, economically and otherwise. How prepared are Western nations for this kind of hybrid cyber warfare? Are we as prepared as we should be, or what's your perspective there?
No, I think so. If you look at the public sector or private sector, let's just take the big organizations who can dump $1 million into their cybersecurity program or $100,000. You're okay. At least you got something, right? You're fighting for yourself. But when it comes to the, that's for the private sector. When it comes to the public sector, I do not believe that local municipalities, local government, or even the federal government is ready for a cyber attack of this magnitude that's coming. Yeah. And the reason is because the first thing, in order for you to dominate another country, you have to take out their water communication and what's it called? If somebody hits an electrical grid in the United States, the transformer replacement, the mechanics behind it is so far down the logistical chain, you're done, it's over, right? You saw that from a natural disaster in Asheville, in Tennessee or North Carolina, right? That was a natural disaster, and we can't even bounce back from that. So if there's a cyber attack that, let's just say, DDoS that overloads a grid or causes a surge and blows out some sort of indirect EMF, I don't think that the public sector is ready. Now, privately, I think we can fend for ourselves, and we have reasonability to bounce back from it. But if you ask me, I don't think the United States is ready yet.
And I guess unless we just take everything offline and go back to manual, that's my favorite recommendation. That's
right. They have books and notebooks.
Exactly.
And on that front, are there things that we as as private individuals and, on the commercial side that we should be doing to protect ourselves from those kinds of attacks, right? Like what are kind of the key things we need to do to make sure that something like that doesn't affect us?
Yeah, from a personal perspective, right? Even a small business perspective, if you can afford it, right? You look at the CISSP model, right? And you go through the whole disaster recovery area. Let's look at that domain. Just apply to your personal life. Like, hey, do you have a backup? Do you have a backup generator? Do you have a backup? If you can't afford that, you can get a Jackery or some sort of lithium battery, whatever. Number two would be, know your digital footprint. If an enemy can't see you, they can't shoot you. Same premise applies in the digital era. If you know your holistic perspective and also your footprint, your digital footprint on the internet, and you can minimize that, that means you'll make yourself a lower target to hit, or even a no target to hit. So that's a couple of different things. When it comes from an infrastructure perspective, I definitely recommend always having two internets, one satellite base and one having your own deal, because in the state of Tennessee where I live, we love tornadoes. And they come out every which way. I'll tell you what, I think we had over 100 sirens in the last 2 weeks go off.
Oh, wow.
So looking forward to going back to Phoenix where nothing happens. So
nothing happens. It's just a little warm.
Just a little warm. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why I'll go to San Diego, go check out the beach.
Oh, that's where John is. Yeah. It's perfect weather year
round. It's always nice here.
What a horrible place. I know.
But those are some things I would try as a personal. But if I'm a small business, I mean, I see it every day. Small businesses, specifically small medical providers, get hit because, one, I hate saying this, doctors are good doctors and they're not good business people, right? And then they're not even further technologists. They're not, right? They're not just when I was working on a project a very long time ago in Phoenix, I met this CIO CISO. And I was like, okay. He was a psychiatrist, and I was like, how does that work? And he's like, I just do this because he was a board member. And I'm like, well, okay, good luck, pal. And I really believe like we as cybersecurity professionals need to be entrusted to take care of the business and also the patients and the patient's data that cannot defend itself.
And so turning your attention a little bit to cyber policy. I mean, you're a national security advisor and have a really interesting purview, right? I'd be interested in your perspective of, cybersecurity policy always feels like it's a little lagging, right? As we try to inch forward, and where do you see opportunities for us to make strides forward, be it in new policies, shaping old policies, execution, or coordination, right? Coordination either within the U.S. or among nations.
Yeah. So when it comes to cyber policy, let's take U.S. Domestic policy first, right? I really believe, and this is going to rub some people the wrong way, you need to remove politicians from the policy making and let the technologists do it. Because one, that's going to be very bureaucratic. And number two, you need to remove any attorney outside of cyber policy. And the reason is because I went to law school myself. Automatically, I want to argue with you and kind of like, well, don't do this, don't do that. And it's just going to get in the way. It's disingenuous and also provides no morality to the path forward.
Right.
Now, that being said, technologists are very smart, right? And we have a chip on our shoulder sometimes, and we're the smartest person in the room. So we kind of need to do this accordion effect. Number two would be, from the law perspective, law will always be behind technology, always. And there are laws now that need to be shored up. But the problem is you have to grease people's palms. You have to bribe people. And I hate saying this, and I hate being that way, but it's the reality, right? Because if you want a law change, you have to know who to shake hands with. Now, from a global perspective, imposing U.S. law to another policy in a foreign country is going to be very difficult.
Right.
But there are similarities because we all want the same thing: is protection of safety.
Extending that to like how should public and private partnerships evolve in order to defend all of this critical infrastructure as well that you've talked about?
Yeah, so there has to be cohabitation, right? So when it comes to private organizations and public organizations, let's just take the internet. A lot of people debate whether it's a utility or it's a right. Okay, so utilities you have to pay for, rights you should have. And the thing is, somebody has to do that. So who owns it? And I believe there has to be co-ownership and also collaboration behind that to balance out who needs to be where. and also possibly even some more of a majority ownership, but not too much. And that's kind of what we have to be very mindful of, because once you start doing those things, you're going to start shaping the behavior and the direction and dictation of a certain community or even culture. So you have to be very mindful. In Myanmar, we actually saw that quite a bit whenever they were like, hey, everybody gets a cell phone, but you have to have one application on there, and it's called Facebook. And then they noticed immediately there's a certain direction of policy change, right? So we have to be very mindful and delicate that we're not having some sort of external influence on these technologies.
Coming back on this idea of coordination among nations, I'm curious in your point of view on NATO, right? Does NATO play a part here somewhere? And I know the act of declaring war, particularly cyber war, right, can be sometimes hard because of attribution or whatnot, but I'd love your perspective here.
NATO's a tough one, right? NATO seems to be the world police or the world advisor, if you will. But in reality, they want the United States to be the whipping child to go do the dirty work. And that's the hard reality of it. A lot of people don't want to hear. NATO wants to give money to the United States, to the big war machine, because the United States, we do well economically when we're at war, when we're fighting something. Look at the Great Depression, look at Iraq, Afghanistan, first Gulf War. Like, our economy does very well when we dominate another culture. However, we have to pay that money back to the NATO, right? And NATO's foreign countries and whatnot. While NATO's premise is good, I think it's a little bit askewed and has been infiltrated and soured from different agendas, going back to where it has just been absolved. Like, there's just no use to have those ideology anymore. So in a unisense perspective, NATO's theory is good, but I don't know from a practical perspective.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very tough one.
Yeah, right. It is.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. I was just thinking too, like as kind of go down this path too of figuring out, you know, you're talking about the policy and in the partnerships, like what are the incident response protocols, and are they sufficient for all of these types of cyber attacks and threats you've been talking about?
Yeah, policies work good in theory, but here's a problem we have now, and a bigger problem. Incident response was really good and narrowed down for 10 to 15, maybe 20 years, right? But we have three big juggernauts now. Now we have artificial intelligence in the mix. Now we have metamorphic and polymorphic ransomware. So nobody's really talking about that and how to address that. I met a few think tanks here and there where they're like, hey, this is how we would address an artificial intelligence rogue from an incident response perspective, but also here's how we would do isolation for metamorphic and polymorphic ransomware. So that's how I kind of approach those different attributes.
And so this is a fun question. It's the role of cyber exercises in war games. Like, what role do they play in preparing national security teams for large-scale geopolitical conflict scenarios? I'm so excited with this answer.
Sure, I have two answers for that. Mike Tyson said it the best. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
And then the other one is, I remember being in Ramadi, Iraq, and young PFC on the machine gun, 50 cal. He's like, "Hey, sir." I was like, "What's going on?" He's like, "They're shooting at us." I'm like, "I know. That's why we're here, son. Let's go." And so it's okay to war game. It's okay to train and whatnot, but you need to take it a step further and actually really believe and breathe this stuff. Because if you're just saying, "Hey, we're going to do a tabletop exercise. Our executives are here. You go get lunch. You go get trash at the local steakhouse afterwards." That's cool. That's cute, right? But you really, really need to, like, warfare train is simulated, gamified, something where you're going to remember, like, this is my role and this is my partner's role. Right. Something in the special operations community that is done quite a bit is, I know my job, I know your job, I know their job, and I know everyone else's job. So in the event I go down, they can take care of it. Same methodology should be applied to war gaming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a lot and very complex, though, right? And trying to prepare. for so much of the unknown, right? And there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I think if you pull yourself out of your environment, you can see the true nature of somebody or your team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in the military, even in law enforcement, we're like, hey, we're gonna go over here right quick, and we don't say anything. We just go, and then all of a sudden the simulation's on, right? And it's like you're getting hit from both sides and taking fire, and someone's casualty, and you get the worst case scenario. And so I think if you do that, but here's the thing, though, I have to be mindful of is that not everybody's a soldier. This is a job to them. Mm-hmm. I live and breathe cybersecurity. I love this stuff, and I treat it as a lifestyle. So I have no problem being in that element versus my friend over here, Sarah, and she's like, I'll get to it.
Right.
You know, and that's okay. Or John or Sean is like, is it really that important? I'm like, yeah, everything's important.
Right.
You know? So balance.
Yeah. So John, do we want to segue into my favorite portion of the personal questions?
Yes, I was leaving it for you.
You know how I feel about this. Well, one of my favorite questions that I love to ask, you know, is getting on the path to cybersecurity. I mean, we talk about digital forensics, you know, in the military, but is this an area that you would even thought about, you know, growing up, or it's just something that you came upon and it sparked this interest and excitement, right, and challenge?
So it's a very interesting answer, or a very interesting question. I'll give you an answer. I thought for all my life I was going to be a knuckle dragger guy out in the battlefield. I was okay that I was like, I'm going to probably die here, and that's okay. Like I'm okay with that, right? Mm-hmm. And then life happens, and I get injured a couple of times in Iraq and Afghanistan. 2014, I got shot, and I was like, hey, I think something's like, hey, you shouldn't come back here. You know, great idea. And my father's statement would be like, use your mind, use your back, just be the best at it, right? And I was like, I think it's time to use my mind. And so that's when I was like, hey, I should start doing these things. And I've always thought about catching the bad guy, right? Bad person, being an operator, going to law enforcement organizations, you know, working in, you know, in the attorney field and whatnot, go get the bad person. But why can't I do it from a digital perspective? And that's how it kind of spawned from there. When I first came to digital forensics, I was not a technical person whatsoever. Right. I was very much having the policy, GRC, auditing and whatnot. And I remember a lot of the cyber community, when I first started, they're like, dude, you're just an idiot. And I'm like, oh, that's not nice. But I realized in order for you to compete with the best, you have to be the best. So I became the best, right?
Exactly.
And I know I'm an outlier myself because the way I look, the fitness that I am, and number three, like the way I talk in the cyber community. So I had to actually kind of become a chameleon and work with everybody. One of the things I always tell people is if you're going to get into cyber, you don't have to be technical. You can work up to be technical, and that's okay.
Exactly.
You know, just do not BS anybody, because there is somebody who's going to be extremely smart on that call, and they're going to be like, that doesn't work. That's not true. And then it becomes like this argument, like, which is not needed, and public beratement is not needed, right? When I would do calls, right? I remember my first CISO gig. I remember that, and it was an eye opener. I came out, I was like, hey folks, just let you guys know, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I don't have all the answers. I'm looking to y'all get the answers. And they level set very quickly. They're like, oh, thanks, Rico. I'm like, you're the network admin. Tell me what I need to do. And they're like, here you go, Rico. And it was better that way, right?
Because you can't, I mean, it's what I find so fascinating about cyber, you can't fake it, right? I mean, they're clear, like yes, no, black, white, if you will. You can't just kind of zhuzh your way through, which I really appreciate and enjoy about this industry, right? Because you're constantly learning. Or
you're going to get schooled very quickly.
All else smart people. So digging a little more on the personal side, you know, we used to have a government business, and you know, a lot of former military were part of that organization. And you talk to them a lot about their stories, and you know, some of them didn't work in cyber or anything, you know, and they came out of the military kind of not sure what was next, you know, and you lose that framework, right, of everything's scheduled, and you know, you go here at this time. Did you find that having that cybersecurity skill set helped you with making a transition from from the military to more kind of private life?
Yeah, it did help because in cybersecurity there are sequential orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
This needs to happen. This is not true. If you go here, they go there. So it gave me like a good working chart. I think before getting out of the military, I think one of the things I was trying to get for is in law enforcement, and it wasn't until later that I got in law enforcement. And so it actually helped me provide a more clear direction of, okay, if this is true, then this is true in cyber. So it gave me more of a pathway forward, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And thinking in totality of all the things that you've done, all the missions, all the experiences you had, right? I mean, what's been the most impactful to you, or what kind of, really stopped you in your tracks, in terms of, wow, that was unexpected.
Well, 2014 was one of them, getting shot. But I think it was like the mentorship of men when I was a young man, of a very, very diverse group of men, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. One of them came to me. I remember his name was Sergeant Sullivan, and he came up to me. He's like, "All right, Rico, so life is going to happen. This will end. What type of man are you going to be?" Not what I wanted to do, but what type of man I wanted to be. And I was like, well, okay. I was like, what about what I want to do? And he's like, that'll come. And so I've had really good, those are the moments that actually kind of stuck out. The other one was getting one of my first CISO gigs, right? Chief Information Security Officer, and understanding how to be an executive. That was really eye-opening. There's a difference between director and VP and then the CISO, like the acumen you have to have, the way you have to talk, the way you have to present yourself, can you take harsh criticism, stuff like that. I think those are the two biggest points in my cyber life that I kind of look at.
It's a really good point. It's, we hear a lot of, CISOs and, how do you have these board level conversations? Because these are business conversations and you have to present it in terms that the board understands. Do you have any, kind of words of wisdom for CISOs struggling here?
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things this is me self-reflecting, right? So I was a very scrappy, chip on your shoulder CISO, like, yeah, that's stupid, don't do that, right? That is not going to work well with people who control a medical organization. That is not going to go well with the people who own a bank, right? Owners of a bank, not just participate, but owners of a bank. Right. Same in pharmacy, right? My skill set is huge in medical. Mm-hmm. So I hate saying this, but you have to become like them to speak to them, right? If they dress a certain way, you might want to dress that way. If they look a certain way, you might want to look that way. If they speak a way, you might want to do that, right? And the other part is know how they want to be presented to. I've had tons of bosses, ruthless bosses. They're like, your presentation's crap, go, right? And what I realized for myself was, I don't want to be that boss. I'm like, hey, appreciate the effort. Might want to try it this way, right? When it comes to the executive investor level, kind of where I'm at now is like, hey, what are we trying to achieve? You can have a no nonsense, no BS conversation without profanity, without being mean, without being anything like that, and then on top of that, I hate saying this, but like a lot of men in the cyber community have a really weird way of talking to women. So you need to control that, right? And know your audience and have respect not only for yourself, because if you look like an idiot, you're going to present as an idiot, right? So,
yeah.
Yep.
I love that phrasing. If it walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Jonathan, did you have any, I know we're coming up on time. Did you have any more questions? I know I've been monopolizing this entire conversation.
I just want to tie some of the pieces together, right? Like I think your journey through going through law school in the middle of this is very intriguing to me. How did you come up to that, and how did that? It feels like that might have helped balance out some of the cybersecurity after the military experience.
Yeah. So I was in the middle of law school, and here's what I want to do. I was like, I'm going to be the best criminal defense, and I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. And then I was like, I want to do sports athletes, right? And any entertainment. So I got a little bit into that. And then I was like, this is really boring because you deal with some crazy athletes and some crazy celebrities. And I was like, is the money really worth it? Because they come up to you, they're like, hey, I need to pay somebody to shut up. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? And so you just come to the point in life, you're like, do I really want to do this? And then the great thing about digital forensics in the middle of law school was digital forensics doesn't talk back. It doesn't, it's evidence. It's like, hey, this is what happened here. This is the truth. And the thing is, the truth kind of was like, you're representing the evidence that cannot represent itself. Right. And that's what just kind of drove me to it. I was like, you know what? This zeros and ones has no fighting chance in hell in court. I'll represent it.
I like that. And I think that's true, right? Like coming down to and finding the truth and being able to express it in a way that aligns with, the expectations as well. So
the truth is either zero or something, 0 or 1, right?
Yeah.
So
it's so satisfying, I imagine, right? I mean, it's
when I had my own private investigating firm, like we were doing forensics and we would see everything, like missing persons cases. Like we're like, all right, well, if we ping the cell phone this way, this is the way, and then we're like, oh, it worked.
Right. Yes.
The other one was, infidelity cases. Like we would dump people's cell phones, and we're like, oh, all right, that's new. And then then contraband cases, and then police departments would come to us all the time and be like, hey guys, we can't get past the passcode. We have a murder case, and we're like, all right, we'll help you out, and this is how we'll do it. We can't touch the computer, but we'll show you how to do it. Stuff like that. Like it was really that was a fun time, real fun time.
I imagine, because it's kind of helping crack the code, right? To open the case wide up and get on a path to solving it and identifying perpetrator, right?
Or on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
We would have defendants. Like when I was working with the Office of Public Defense, we had a guy who was locked up for 15 years. And nobody had ever looked at the cell phone, triangulation. And I looked it over. I was like, hey, I threw it out there. I was like, motion to dismiss based upon evidence. And they were like, yeah, no problem. Boom, gone. I was like, oh, man gets his life back.
That's awesome.
So it was pretty, I think it's balanced on both sides. That's why I love the evidence. The evidence is there.
Right. Zeros and ones, right? Yeah.
Zeros and ones or zeros and nothing.
Yeah. It's, I love these, murder shows and things like that. And it's crazy that, some innocent people, as you know, right? Like before kind of the DNA typing and all those things that, have been wrongly accused and, spend so long in prison. And then, these technology advancements, give them an opportunity to reclaim their life. And I hate to hear those stories, but I love that there is remediation for those people. That's really exciting.
I think for my next trick, I already created it. I sold it. It was called Autism Care App, right? It was for an artificial intelligence application that goes on your phone to treat people who live with autism, right? And who are functioning people. I think the next thing is to take that data set, model it, and figure out not necessarily a cure, but also a means of method and modality of how to make life a little bit better.
Yeah. So to that point, we love the AI topic. I mean, where do you see that going and kind of role that it plays both in the cyber warfare as well as the cyber solutions?
The first one to win the arms race is going to win the world. So what I think the United States is a little bit behind, maybe a couple years behind, because we're barely saying we want our own national artificial intelligence, even though there's DARPA and whatnot. China has came out and was like, we have our own national artificial intelligence, and they're using it for bad, right? They're using it for global domination. We want to use it not only for military presence, combat warfare, but also strategic alignment and also initiatives that can help us out, right? So I think the United States has enough and we are the American dream, and I think they're going to push forward with that. So,
if it were to run as a national program, how would you balance privacy and efficacy? Because those seem like they're a little bit opposed.
Something's going to have to bend. I hate saying that. Efficacy is based upon moralities and a set of morals of interpretation, right? If the person, the developer, has an efficacy in the morality or the morale basis of XYZ, then it'll go that way. Now, when it comes to privacy, I hate being this guy, but like there is no privacy. Right. There is none. And so the thought is a good legal argument, like, you know, GDPR and also California rules and regulations. And that's great in theory, but in reality, it's a failed policy.
Yeah, it sucks. When GDPR first came about, I remember hearing a lot about companies. They're like, you know, I'm just going to roll the dice and see how it goes, you know, because I mean, who's knocking on all the doors to check that these things are happening?
So now, and I'm glad you brought that up. Now you have the premise of the SEC prosecuting the CISOs. Mm-hmm. And so that actually sets a precedence, the legal precedence is saying, hey, if you don't comply, we will legally reprimand you. In Mexico and Colombia and Brazil, they actually do prosecute executives for technology negligence.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's jail time and fines and stuff. I'm like, man.
It's, I've been hearing a lot more about that in recent years, and you know, boards becoming, you know, culpable, financially culpable. You know, when these incidents happen, you know, the stakes are very high.
Look at the case of Uber, right? The Uber CISO, the dude got jail time, and that's it. I was like, whoa, wait, hold on, we're sending people to jail now. And there was a specific senator who was like just beating on the harp on that, and she threw a lot of money at him to put him in jail. And mind you, he did 9-10 service. I think he did 1 year in jail and 5 years probation. But he's okay. But still, like that put us as executive CISOs are like, whoa, hold on. Yeah. What do I got to do to legally protect myself now?
Wow. Do we see that hindering our industry? I know we have a talent gap. Yeah. You know, it's hate to kind of thwart people from, you know, wanting to be part of this, but also that's a tough one to walk into.
Yeah, I would definitely say my advice to CISOs or people who want to be CISOs, always tell the truth or tell the truth about the risks, right? Like, hey, here's our risks, and document them. And number 2, get yourself some sort of protection. Either be a good attorney, get yourself a good attorney, or have one on retainer. Or the other part I'm starting to see is called D&O insurance, director and officer insurance. Get that, protect yourself, because the business world has no loyalty, right? Cyber has no loyalty either. Unfortunately, it's zeros and ones. But I definitely recommend, like, it's a hell of a ride. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Jonathan, anything else? I just want to be respectful of time.
I don't know. Rico's now has me all scared, so.
I know. I could keep talking like for an hour to make sure we cover all our bases. Well, Ricoh, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and thank you for you know, putting up with all of our peppering of questions, because this has been a wonderful perspective that our listeners haven't had before, and that's why we do this.
Absolutely. We should do it again. Let me know. I'm here to be of service and rock and roll.
Awesome. We love that, because a lot can happen in a year. There's a lot to talk about. We will absolutely take you up on that. So to all of our listeners, thanks again for joining us this week. And don't forget, you got to smash, right, Jonathan? Smash
that subscribe button. Yes.
And you get a fresh episode right to your email every single Tuesday. So until next time, everybody, stay safe.